Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew 𝐏𝐚𝐫𝐭. Today, we are out in California with a guy who started on the other coast. He had an undefeated high school cross-country season where he went on to win the state championship and the New England championship. And then he did it again in college, undefeated, and the New England championship. Also a top marathoner, couple-time All-American, couple-time top 10 in Boston, top American there, national champion in the marathon, 20 plus years in the industry, and a whole new program of working with younger runners. If you go to his Facebook page and flip through, you'll see photos with him and his arms around people all through the running world. You'll recognize everybody. He seems to know everybody, both through his running career and his work in the industry. And that even goes on today. And you'll recognize some people that you might have seen at the World Championships at Poland, setting world records last summer, winning Olympic and World Championship medals too. The young folks all know our guest today too. Welcome, Ron Wayne.
Thank you very much, Matt. And I don't know if you can hear it, but my dog in the background has a toy and he's squeaking like crazy. I think he wants to be part of this.
I think we need to get him a remote mic. I can barely hear it. Okay.
That's good.
Ron is a guy that likes a lot of sports. Maybe it's great for the running world that he found out he was a little bit better at running than he was at basketball early in life. But he knows people today in the basketball world and NFL runners who are also involved in running. So a lot of interesting names will come up. Let's talk about your origins, Ron. It's a well-known story to those that have followed your career, but how did you get involved, when, where in your first running?
I'm actually going to take a step back. When I was in Little League Baseball, my Brockton North Little League team won the Massachusetts State and New England Championship. I was 11 years old. About half the team was 11. We got on our first plane ride down to New Jersey. Unfortunately, the format was different back then. By winning the New England Championship, we would have played in the Little League World Series. But back then, they had 4 regional championships. So we played for the Eastern Regional Championship of the United States. 1 loss and you're out. Unfortunately, we got beat by the defending world champion team from Pennsylvania. I think it was Levittown, Pennsylvania. But it was a great experience. So I was a baseball player. Matter of fact, my car sitting out in front of the house says Red Sox 08 on it, my California license plate. I played Little League, went into North Junior High with those 4 junior high teams. And of course, a lot of the players on the Little League team went to my junior high. We were great there. But in high school at Brockton High, it was only 3 grades. It was 10, 11, 12. And the school was overcrowded. So 10th grade, we went to class from 1 to 5 in the afternoon. It really hurt sports. But I went out for the baseball team and I got cut. I was one of the best ball players in the city, and I was devastated. I love sports, and I actually went out for the track team, and I ran the 100-yard dash, the 220. And in the league championships, sophomore division, I came in second. I got 2 ribbons. My father was a quarter miler at Brookline High in Massachusetts. My brother, who was 11 years after me, was All-American at Westfield State in the quarter mile and the mile relay. And at Brockton High, the mile relay team set the state record, beating Rinch Tech. He was part of that team. So I had the speed in me, and I really just went out for the track team just to be involved because I love sports. What happened was in junior high, I played basketball, baseball, football. I was the point guard, 8th and 9th grade. And then at Brockton High, we had our own 10th grade team because of the split session. We had a whole league of 10th grade teams we played against. When I found out that the incoming cross-country coach, Harry Allen, was going to be the assistant varsity basketball coach, I thought if I went out for the team, I'd show him I had a pretty good work ethic. And
with cross country, yeah.
With cross country. If I just showed up, I tried hard, then maybe I'd get on the varsity team instead of the JV team for basketball. Because I was a point guard, but I was not the starter. I was second in line. I show up August 15th, 1965, first time ever. I was about to turn 16 the next day. I didn't know what I was doing. I'm not even sure I had a pair of running shoes, but I just followed what everybody was told to do. And two things happened. Number one, I had a very good coach in Harry Allen, even though he was brand new, come from a neighboring city where at a different high school, he led that team into the state championship. It was a little lower classification. By the way, Brockton High was the second biggest high school east of the Mississippi. I think Brooklyn Tech was the biggest. Currently, they have over 4,000 students with 4 grades. So I had 1,000 kids in my graduating class. There was number one, Harry Allen, the coach, but there was a fellow teammate, Ed Norris. He came from Great Britain, from England. His father, Fred Norris, ran in the Olympics in '52 and finished 7th in the 10,000 meter to Zotepec. He probably held close to 50 records, Commonwealth Games, Great Britain. He won the International Cross Country Championship in 1959. He was 3rd in the Boston Marathon. He had a tremendous career, and he guided Ed, and Ed was one of the top high school runners in the country. And I just chased him every day. And one thing led to another. I started to get pretty good. I worked my way up to the second person on the team. About the 3rd or 4th race in was the Catholic Memorial Invitational, which was held in Boston on the state meet course. This was the first time I had participated in a race where there's 20, 25 teams. Up until that time, it was just a dual meet. And the race gun goes off and all these people are sprinting. I went out way too hard. I probably walked 3 or 4 times, came across the finish line and said, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? This hurts. But that feeling went away. If there's any runners out there, you probably shared some of that experience. And when you began your careers, I stuck with it. And I ran with it every day. And I became the second person on the team. Then it came time at the end of the season. What am I going to do? Am I going to go to basketball or am I going to join the indoor track team? And I joined the indoor track team, ran my first race at MIT indoors. When Ed ran the 2 mile, I ran the mile and I won. I won a race because I never won a cross country race. Ed was always the star runner. He won the state meet and he was 3rd in New England's to Art Dulon in cross country. So winning was fun. Hey, this is getting really fun. And I stuck with it. I improved my times. I ran outdoor track. That was my junior year. Ed graduated. All summer, I ran road races with Ed. Let me step back to indoors. Brockton High did not have an indoor track. There was a girls' gym that had a 22 lap to the mile board. Seemed like you're always running on the banks. It wasn't flat. On Sundays, Fred Norris would drive his son Ed and myself into the Boston Garden because Fred had joined the BAA, and so did Ed and I after cross country. And Jock Semple was a trainer for the Boston Bruins and the Celtics, and he knew we were coming. He opened the door, and Ed and I would run on the lower concourse around and did loops. And
Who was anybody else there?
no, they may be setting up for maybe Friday night. Or Saturday was the Celtics, and the Bruins were going to play later, and they had to get the ice set up. But we were just running by ourselves. Yeah. In the turns, you ran uphill to enter the turn, and then you came downhill on the backside. Whatever Ed did, I followed him, and his father was giving us the workouts. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. Here was an interesting thing. I never knew Fred was the star runner that he was. He never talked about himself. I knew one thing. He was the world record holder for the 2-hour run. And I'm thinking 2-hour run, who knows anything about that? I didn't know much about the sport, and I was always learning.
You grew up in Boston, and you went to the Boston Marathon before you ever thought of being a runner, right?
Both of my grandparents lived on the Boston Marathon course in Brookline on Beacon Street. And so from the time I could stand up, one set of grandparents lived a half a block from Beacon Street. We'd go up there, and I had the Boston newspaper, and there was maybe 200-300 runners in the 1950s and 60s that were competing. And I'd look up the course, and I'd say, here comes number 22. Okay, go John. Actually, one of those years, Fred Norris went by me. I have a photo of the 2022 Boston Marathon. And what I did was I stopped the TV coverage because it was right at Fairbanks Street, where I actually stood to watch the race. And you can see children right there watching the race. And I'm saying to myself, that was me back then. I wonder if they're going to be runners when they grow up. So I had the Boston Marathon in my mind, but I always wondered, was this the only race that they ever ran all year? And how do you train for this? I never knew. And little did I know, I'd run it 8 times. I'd have 2 top 10 finishes, and I'd be the top American one year.
Let me ask you about cross country. Your first season, you finished 19th. Was that all state? Did you get a medal for that?
Massachusetts had, I believe, 5 classifications based on the size of your student population. Brockton High was a big school. I was 19th in Class A. Ed won, and I was 19th.
Did you get a medal? Was that all state?
No.
Oh.
I don't even have a medal for when I won the next year. So I don't.
Oh my gosh! Yeah. Wow. So what was the status of the sport in Brockton when you started running compared to, you can have big football and basketball programs that kind of overshadow. What was the status of running?
Well, Brockton is nicknamed the City of Champions. That's Rocky Marciano, the championship boxer heavyweight, Marvelous Marvin Hagler, another world champion. And a lot of the sports teams were very successful because the student population had a lot of people to draw from until they went to split sessions. Because if you got out of school at 12:30 when you were a junior or senior, maybe you went to work. You could get a job. But there was a history of success of sports. Cross country running did have some success. I don't remember what year it was, but they were New England champions for high school, if not New England state champions, maybe in the 30s. But it wasn't until Harry Allen came that things really changed. Not only did I win the New England championship as an individual, his second year of coaching, we won the New England team championship. And I believe they won it 2 out of the next 3 years. They had a streak going of 100 and something dual meets. I don't know if that was a record, but it was a very successful program. And it kept building. We chased Ed and got good. Then everybody chased me. And then the teams after me, there were some very good runners.
What about your relationship with the coach? You heard him coming in as a part of the basketball program and then ran with him. What did you think about his knowledge of running and the way he guided the team?
My knowledge was nothing. I had a starting point of this was all new to me, but I enjoyed it. Whatever people asked me to do, whether it was the coach or my teammates who were better than me, I just followed. I respected everything he taught us and coached us. I believe all my teammates bought into the program. He even took us out to one of the beaches. We got a school bus and we went out and ran on the beaches. So I thought he knew what he was doing. And Ed was successful. And obviously he was very successful. The disappointing thing was because he was the basketball coach, he was not my indoor coach or my outdoor coach. And that was a coach who was a sprint coach, and he didn't know anything about distance running really. So without Ed that first year, I would have been lost indoor track and outdoor track. I just followed him and his father, what his father wanted us to do. And the next year we had the knowledge of what to do on our own if it wasn't exactly what we thought we should be doing.
Do you think that kind of paradigm affected you, either gave you confidence or made you think, I can do this on my own. I won't go get a coach. I won't join a running club. Later in life, you were self-coached, right?
I was still in the world of high school. I didn't even know what was out there after high school. I didn't know anything about college running. I didn't know anything about road racing, although I started to run a few road races when Fred would take Ed, whatever Ed did. If he was going to run a 5-mile race or a 10-mile race, I ran it. I got smarter about the sport and got stronger and more confidence. But I will tell you, if we can go fast forward, I was self-coached in the marathon. That was a big mistake. If I had joined the Greater Boston Track Club, if I was living in the Boston area, and I did end up going to grad school in Eugene, and I did run with Russ Pate, along with John Anderson and myself. We won the team prize at Boston. That was 1973 when John won the race. This was the first time I had somebody to really train with and go 20 and 20 milers, 25 milers. But I didn't run with him 6 other days of the week. It was just Sundays. And I was on my own. I should have been training with people better than me.
What was about college recruiting? When you're state and New England champion, there's got to be interest. How did the recruiting go?
I ended up with a running shoebox full of letters from colleges around the country. My parents didn't want me to leave New England. They wanted me to stay for various reasons, wanted me to stay in the area. Ed Norris went to Kent State, and he ran with Sam Bear, one of the successful runners that I've already done a podcast with. I wanted to go to Kent State. I even went out there and visited him when I was at UMass. Our vacations were a little bit different. I think it was winter vacation, and I slept on his dorm floor and actually ran a track meet out there, and I actually beat him in the mile. It was the first time I ever beat him in my life. I edged him out. I did have interest in going to Kent State only because Ed was there. I really didn't know anything about colleges, who had the best programs. When I went to UMass, they didn't even have an outdoor track. We had cross country home and away meets. Indoors, we had the cage where I got to watch Dr. J, Julius Erving, practice basketball, because during our indoor workouts, he was shooting hoops and we were running circles around on the wooden track around the basketball court, but we couldn't hold meets there. So we were on the Peter Pan bus for indoor meets and for outdoor meets for a couple of years until we finally got a track.
You ran in the IC4As, you had the New England championships. What else? How far afield did you travel to race from UMass?
I ran the NC2A cross country championships twice. One year, our school got put on probation. I think it was my junior year. It wasn't because of running. It was either football or basketball infraction. I remember the athletic director coming in and saying, sorry, you won't be going to the NC2As this year. And to me, okay, I guess I'm not going. But my senior year, when Ed was a fifth-year senior, he finished 24th, and I was 48th. So we had two guys from the same high school in the top 48. That was pretty good, I thought. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed being there with Ed, because once he went out to the Midwest, I hardly ever saw him again.
What kind of student were you? What did you major in? How was the transition to college?
I was very much into sports, as we've talked about. So I was a physical education major, really majoring in running. All I really wanted to do was run after I caught the bug, but I was a very good student. I was on the National Honor Society in Brockton. Only 29 students had all A's and B's of the 890 people. Started with 1,000 people, 890 people graduated. So I knew how to get A's and B's. I maybe didn't know how to learn, but I knew how to take tests. But I enjoyed college life. I had a lot of great teammates, and I pretty much hung around them. My whole life was either running or the physical education students, where I had a lot of relationships, which is very important in this world that I preach now to this SMARTeam initiative that we may talk about later.
Who were the people that you ran against over and over in that Northeast New England and set of colleges that UMass went? Who were the people that time?
One name that sticks out is John Vitale. At the time, UMass was in the Yankee Conference Championship. All the 6 state schools in New England were in that conference. And we competed against each other in dual meets and cross country, indoor track and outdoor track. And John was at UConn. UConn had a powerhouse of distance runners. Steve Flanagan, a very good runner, international runner, Shalane's father. I think the toughest cross-country race I ever put myself through was the Yankee Conference Championship, sophomore year, University of Vermont. And John Dimmick was in that race. That's where he went to school. And at the mile mark, it was myself and 7 Connecticut guys. I hit the gas pedal and took off, and I won. I think Vitali was second. I don't know the medical term for it, but when I finished and I went to the locker room, my body did not shut down. I was walking around. The coach was walking me around. I was talking. I ran well beyond what I was trained for. And it never, ever happened to me again. And I know there's a term for it, but that was one of the toughest races I ever ran. I did set 5 school records at UMass. Back then, when I was a freshman, freshmen were not eligible to run in varsity.
Right.
So I had a freshman 2-mile outdoor record that I set at Boston College. I had the freshman cross-country course record. I had the varsity cross-country course. And I had the indoor mile and indoor 2-mile UMass records. I ran a lot of road races. My favorite sport was cross-country, and I loved indoor track because we had all these little loops, little circles. So by the time outdoor came, a couple things. I was very tired from the road racing, the cross-country, and the indoor. And the weather in New England, you grew up in Pennsylvania, so you had a taste of it. It could be snowing the first meets that we're competing in. And on the bulletin board, I'm looking at UCLA's outdoor track meets, and they're running all these great times. What am I doing? But we were tough New England kids. We grew up, and that's what we were used to.
Were the freshman meets that you ran with UMass at the same time as the varsity? Did you just run separate heats?
To my recollection, most of them were the same time. There were some that were separate. Yeah.
Okay. What were you thinking about running? You graduated in 71. Up until that point, almost nobody had thought of what am I going to do with running after college. Famously, Jumbo Elliott would say to his guys, okay, you had your career, go get a job, get married, have a life. And there weren't that many opportunities, but what did you do next? Is that when you drove and moved across the country? What were you thinking?
Several of my teammates ran marathons while they were in college. Tom 𝐑𝐮𝐬, my teammate for 4 years at UMass, he and about 3 or 4 other guys ran marathons, and they talked about marathoning all the time. And we go out and run the Doggy Loop, which was a 10-mile training run in the countryside from UMass. Beautiful area to train. And they pretend if it was the Olympic year, we'd take different countries and we'd represent different countries and we'd sprint out and take the lead. So I caught the marathon bug, not only from Tom and a few of my other teammates, Joel Fox and a couple others, but I grew up with it, watching the Boston Marathon. And all of a sudden, okay, maybe I'll run the marathon one day. But I hit a roadblock. It's called the Vietnam War. And in my senior year was the first year they ever instituted the lottery. And I was used to winning a lot of things. Unfortunately, I won a low number and I got drafted. Wasn't in my plans, but I ended up going to Fort Lewis in Washington for basic training and advanced infantry training in Fort Polk, Louisiana. I was in infantry. But running saved me because I got called in the first week of basic training. I thought, okay, what did I do? What did I do? And they said, hey, we see you've had a successful running career. We'd like you to be the acting first sergeant and get up there and help lead exercises every day. So there's 200 people in the company, and here I am. They gave me my own room. I had my own bed, and they allowed me to go out and run after the training. I got in the worst shape of my life because one of the most exciting things to do is to eat. So I was eating 3 times a day, and I'd go out and run a little bit, and I gained 10 pounds. I didn't go from undergraduate school to graduate school, but what I did was I joined the reserves. And what that allowed me to do was to not go to Vietnam, give a 6-year commitment to the reserves, which then went to the National Guard when I moved to Oregon. And I had to attend meetings once a week and then 2 weeks in the summer. So I was allowed to train to continue my career. But what happened was I ran my first Boston Marathon in 72. I graduated UMass in 71. I came back in the middle of the school year from the Army, and I volunteered to be an assistant coach, and I started upping my mileage. One of the athletes on the UMass cross country track team actually was a group of runners. They graciously allowed me to crash there. And I just started upping my mileage by myself. I read books, didn't know what I was doing. And I ran the New England AAU 30-kilometer championship. I think it was a little over a month before Boston. I won it, and I averaged 5:10 a mile. And so the Boston newspapers, they wrote articles, and they said I'd be the local guy to watch. My longest training run was 120 miler. So I get to the starting line, didn't know what I was doing. And it said I could run with the leaders. That's what the Boston paper said. Okay, I can do that. And
For 20 miles at least.
Boy, did I pay a price. It hurt to finish the last 6. I was always a very good uphill runner, but coming downhill, finishing to Boston, it was painful. But I qualified for the Olympic trials. So my first race was Boston. Back in those days, you didn't have to have a qualifying time. There's only 4, 5, 6, 800 runners. Then I went to Eugene for the trials. My plan was to go to grad school at Springfield. I was going to be a PE teacher. I go out to Eugene, and I realized that this was the jogging capital of the world. Bill Bowerman was the coach. He wrote the book Jogging, and the culture was such that the people at the track meet really understood who you were. And it, to me, was maybe I should go to school here. So I applied and I got in. And that's how I ended up in Eugene, Oregon. And at the time, Steve Prefontaine was his senior year. I guess I was a risk taker. And I guess if you're a runner and you're winning races, you go out to the front and you do know how to deal with risk. I get accepted. I load my car up. I didn't know anybody. It took me 5 days to drive across the country. I stayed in a youth hostel. And the next day I went over to Coach Dillinger's office. He was the cross country coach. This is September of 1972. I knock on the door and stick my head in. Coach, my name's Ron Wayne, and I ran the Olympic trials. And do you know if anybody on your cross country team might need a roommate? And he said, I don't know, but you're in luck. The team's downstairs. Let me show you the way. He showed me where the door was. I opened it and I stuck my head in and said, hey, I'm a grad student. I competed in the Olympic trials and the marathon. Anybody need a roommate? And from the back corner of the room, this guy named Paul Geis yells out, hey, you got a car? I said, yeah. He says, come over here. Paul was the AAU 3-mile champion. He had transferred in from Rice University. He was the one that could possibly beat Pre. So everybody hated him. He ended up becoming my roommate.
No roommate for Paul, yeah.
And the other roommate was Steve Bentz. He wrote the book 1972, which refers to the start of Nike. And Steve's still at Nike. He's been there over 40 years. And between the two of them, that gave me an in immediately to the track team. And we'd go out and run in the morning. I'd run with them in the morning and then do my own further distance in the afternoon or speed work geared towards marathon training. I really lucked out that.
And Bench was good friends with Prefontaine, even though
they were very good friends.
He didn't hate Paul, did he?
Steve was a champion 800-meter runner. He was very good. He went to high school in Europe, but came over, and they gave him a walk-on trial, and he became a very good runner. But the day that Pre died, Pre spent most of the day with Steve Bentz, and it's just a very sad story. So Steve knows a lot about his life, and they spent a lot of time together. And I'm still very good friends with Steve Bentz today. Unfortunately, Paul passed away maybe 6, 8 years ago now. He actually made the Olympic team and was in the finals in 76 in the 5,000 meters. Very, very good runner. Very nice person.
Your marathoning did pick up for the next 5, apart from injury, and we'll talk about what happened for the trials. But how quickly did you see that this is exactly the right decision and your marathoning pick up?
I ended up running 2:27:02 with a lot of deceleration, the last part, the Boston Marathon. I came in 30th, and you had to run 2:30 or better to qualify to compete in the Olympic trials in Eugene, which was held, I believe, in July of 72. I ended up finishing 20th. I ran 2:28. I didn't go out with the leaders, Frank Shorter or Kenny Moore, Jeff Galloway. I ran smarter, but I still wasn't trained properly. Even though I was running with Ed, just didn't do very many 20 miles. And I'm not sure Ed knew what he was doing. But I will say that Ed and I are the only two runners from the same high school that have both won the U.S. National Marathon Championship. So that's a pretty good achievement.
And that's a crazy thing for the high school. Let's talk about that race. There's so many to talk about. Let's talk about the national championship marathon that you won. What were you expecting at the starting line?
This was 1977.
Ron asked me to correct that. It was 1974.
It was Yonkers in New York. And the course was, I believe, 3 loops. And it started on a dirt racetrack. So you actually ran on a horse track. It was a very hilly course, too. A lot of turns. And you really couldn't see what was going on in front of you looking at a far distance. Can't remember how it went, but I probably went out with the leaders for a portion, but fell back. Then I started picking runners off. And on the last lap, a car of race officials came driving up next to me. One of the people was Joe Douglas, who was Santa Monica Track Club, Carl Lewis's coach. And he said, "Ron, John Vitale's up there. You're in second." I couldn't see him. I didn't know that. And this was approaching the last mile. And we're going over the hills, up a hill. And I said, "Oh, there's a runner. Okay." So I kept going. I kept charging after him. We enter the race course, the horse race course. It's a field. And next to it is the track itself. I knew the course. I knew you had to go maybe 100 yards or so to the finish line. John Vitale, when he was entering through the gate, there was a race official there. And apparently at the same time, there was another runner coming in who had another lap to go. And if you're running a marathon, you should know the course. You've got to know where the finish line is. The story is that John Vitale misunderstood that he had more to go instead of just going to the finish line. And I was catching him, and I caught up to him and sprinted and passed him and won by less than a half a second. And it was the fastest marathon ever run in the state of New York. It was the first sub 220 ever. And it was the state record until Bill Rogers, I believe later that year, won his first New York marathon. And that opened a lot of doors for me. I got to compete internationally in Japan and Europe and road races all over the United States. So I shouldn't have won that race. I probably should have finished second. And in 1978, I came in second. I should have won.
Was that also Vitale?
No, this was not Vitale. This was in preparation for the trials in 80, where we weren't going to go because of the boycott. But the year before was the trials, and it was Buffalo to Niagara. You started in New York and you went over the Peace Bridge, I think it was.
Right, that's the Peace Bridge. And then you got about 20 miles in Canada. Yeah.
There you go, your current home country. And there was probably a group of 20 of us. And I'm just hanging on, and I'm listening, and I'm biding my time. With about 4 miles to go, I think I got down to about 4 or 5 people. I took off. And I was running well within myself. There was a strong headwind that day. And with about 2 miles to go, I don't know why it happened, but I strained my abdominal muscles and I could not breathe. It was painful just to take a step. I hung in there, but Carl Hatfield came by, excellent runner, 10,000 meter runner, and I ended up coming in second. And I remember going back to the hotel room and then laying in the bathtub. I couldn't even get up. My wife had to pull me up. So I should have won that race. There's no question. Easily.
How long did that injury take you out? How long did it take for it to heal?
I'd say less than a week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it wasn't long term.
Let's get one other disappointment out, and then we'll get back to happy stuff. But the Olympic trials in 76, you were running really well. You'd placed high in lots of marathons. Your time was coming down, but the trials didn't happen for you in 76.
Yeah, my best ranking in the United States by Track and Field News, the Bible of sport, I was ranked third in the marathon in the United States. I had the confidence. The race was in Eugene, and it was on my Sunday 20 to 25 mile training course. Like Bill Rogers knows the Boston Marathon course in the hills where the Greater Boston guys would train on the course. This was my course. This was my comfort zone. I run Beta Breakers in May, the month before the marathon, as a speed workout. I think I was fourth. I came and I stayed down at the finish line a little bit too long. Typical San Francisco weather, cold, windy. I came down with bronchial pneumonia. 101 temperature, I'm up at the starting line, and I'm not going to run, but I watched it. So I could not compete. And if there was ever a time in my career to make the Olympic team, this was it. Because I had beaten almost everybody that was in that race at one time or another, and it was on my course. That was the disappointment. But
and the next year you beat everybody, even the people that went to the Olympics that year.
If there's a positive to this, and I don't know if you can call this a positive, this was 1976. I rested up. I had met a doctor, call him Dr. Steve. There's another whole story there. Maybe I will tell you about that. He was taking care of me, and he was putting me on different medicines, and he put me on Bactrim. And I immediately broke out in hives. He said, get off it, get off it. So I got off it. The hives went away, but so did 2 or 3 months of this congestion, because they were talking about cutting part of my lung out. That's how serious it was.
Wow.
So I rested up, and I don't know, maybe it's like a woman coming off of pregnancy, but I had some rest, and I trained for the Honolulu Marathon, which was later that year. I came in second. Duncan McDonald, who was an Olympian that year in the 5,000, won. He was the defending champion from Hawaii. He knew the course. But 3 or 4 guys behind me ran the Olympic marathon, and I beat them. We're talking Cardong and Sandoval, Jack Foster from New Zealand.
One other correction Ron wanted to make. It wasn't Don Cardong that he beat. It was Kenny Moore.
So I guess it made up for my opportunity to not compete in the Olympics. That was my Olympics. And it was the beginning of a very successful 1977, where I ran 5 sub 220 marathons. I was top American at Boston. Nobody had ever run 5 sub 220s in the same calendar year. I think I actually ran 6 in 12 months. Remember, I was working full time at the same time and not getting paid in any of these races. So we did it for the love of the sport. It was a lot different than today's runner.
Were you an outlier at 5 or 6 in 12 months, or were some of the other people running? They weren't all running 220s every time, but were other people racing as much as you too?
Yeah, I'd say people ran more than the typical run 2 races, a fall and a spring race, and make a lot of money at the elite races around the world. But yeah, there was a number of people who ran multiple races because that's what we did. You know, that was part of the sport.
How did you psychologically handle these ups and downs of this journey? Having undefeated seasons and a lot of success at the level you were, an All-American, then when you got into marathoning, it's definitely, nobody can have the best day every time out. How did you handle those ups and downs psychologically?
I handled it by myself. I didn't really have anybody to talk to because I was self-coached, which was, again, a big mistake. I guess as a competitive athlete, baseball, basketball, football, I always wanted to win, always wanted to do my best. And then being successful in running, I just gave it time to heal up or whatever the issue was, the flu, and just got back into it. I competed for 20 years. And I could see that my last years at Boston, where I could still run 218, 217, but I'm finishing 40th, you know, and the 10,000 meter guys are moving up and they're running the 212s, 211s, and 208s. It was time to move on to a different direction. And that was fine. 20 years was a lot.
Yeah, it's a long career, a 10-year career. is really a crowning achievement. A lot of people I've talked to have made it that, and that wasn't what they figured at the beginning that they would last. It was a time when nobody knew. You were an outlier to have a 20-year career that started in the 60s. Yeah. Tell me something about Dr. Steve. How did you connect, and what was your job that you were working while you were running?
Dr. Steve. Yeah, and I started Nike managing one of the retail stores they had just opened up called the athletic department. Let me throw in some relationship stuff here. I finally get somebody to train with, Russ Pate, and there was another fellow, Tom Ratliff, who ironically, I outkicked him in the 2-mile in the IC4A indoors in Madison Square Garden to win the heat. He ran at Gettysburg College out your way in Pennsylvania. Congratulated, we said thanks and maybe see you again someday. Years go by and I see him, he's my training partner. He was in grad school at Oregon. So the three of us are training together. Tom says, you know what? I'm going to leave grad school and I'm going to go work for Nike. There's a store opening up in Berkeley. And if you want to finish grad school, come on down. There'll be a job waiting for you. So there's a relationship where I had a job waiting for me at Nike. I talk to people today and they say, what was your employee number? Employee number? Yeah, 100. 100. It's not 30,000 or 50,000 like it is today. So because of relationships, I had a job waiting. And then my other training partner, Russ Pate, says, how'd you like to go to grad school for nothing? I said, what do you mean? He said, I'm getting my PhD here. I'm in charge of graduate assistantships. How would you like to teach women's jogging and co-ed bowling? And you can go to school for nothing. You get everything paid for. I said, okay. So how many people can say that Hayward Field was their classroom? I had classes of 30 women, co-eds. I'm teaching women's jogging and I'm going to school for nothing. So there's a life lesson there. Relationships, relationships, relationships. Getting back to Dr. Steve. So I'm working for Nike. After a couple of years in the management position, retail management, Nike's growing, and they created a position called West Coast Running Promotions. They wanted me to create some races. I was sitting at a tennis tournament in San Francisco next to a gentleman named Steve Mirasu. He was part of the oldest family winery in the United States, Mirasu. It was Mirasu Vineyards, and he was a runner. And we got talking. He said, hey, can you put a race on in my vineyards? So I created probably the first ever race that started and finished in front of the wine tasting room that went through the vineyards. And it filled up to maximum like 1,200 people every year. Nike gave me t-shirts. We did a wine glass with the race logo on it. We bottled one of the wines with the race logo and the winners every year. And Steve Prefontaine's girlfriend, Nancy Allman, won the first race for women. That was fun. So I also did a race with the Golden State Warriors, the Oakland A's, and then I created the Nike Couples Reeling and Disco Booze Cruise. This was a fun one. And this was just at the time that Night Track came out, the Nike disco shoe. It was a silver colored shoe with a candy red apple stripe and speckled bottom. So the race consisted of a 3.5-mile loop for the women. I think the men went first, then the women did the same loop. And I chartered a boat and we had 500 couples on there with a disco, and you took your age of the two runners and added it up together and became categories, and we gave out prizes. So I did all this stuff. I work with athletes. I work with races. Nike said, hey, we appreciate what you're doing. Go down to LA and do the same thing. I was ready to move. My roots were in the Berkeley, Alameda area. I live in Alameda now. I packed up, and Dr. Steve had moved from San Francisco area down to LA. I called him up and said, hey, Steve, Nike wants me to move. Got a suggestion of where I can stay. Can I stay at your house? He was renting a house in West LA, and he was sharing it with Dorothy Stratton and Paul Schneider. Dorothy Stratton was the 1980 Playmate of the Year. So I was going to sleep on the couch, but Paul Schneider said, no, you can't sleep on the couch. So I slept on the floor in Steve's bedroom. And the reason I went down there, Steve and I were going to go look for a house to buy. And we ended up buying a house in Playa del Rey. So I went back home, and I wasn't going to move for a couple of months. And I'm doing some promo work for Nike, and I hear on the radio, and in LA today, Dorothy Stratton, and then I hear, in my mind, I just said she's dead. And I don't know why.
Right.
Paul Schneider had killed her. They had separated. He had come back to the house to talk about separation. She was dating the actor Bogdanovich, but he shot her, killed her, and killed himself. Steve comes home that night, and his dog is barking and barking. He goes into this room and finds their bodies. So we did end up with their furniture and brought that into the house. And it was a sad story, but that's my connection to Playboy and Dr. Steve. And we're still friends today, Dr. Steve.
Yeah, just a few years after some of the Manson things had happened out there. Wow, yeah, a lot of stuff going on. Back on your running, and let's just go through that from, let's say, 71 to 77, a little bit onwards up through 80. The change in marathon facilities, run fees, the explosive growth of the number of runners, aid stations, timing. When did you see the big shifts? Was there one or two big leap years when things changed?
When I ran Boston in 72, my first time ever running a marathon, there was no official aid stations. It was just people along the course were handing you didn't know what you were getting. Water, Coke, whatever, beer. And the mile markers were crazy. They were in the middle of the city of where you went through. You start in Hopkinton, you go to Ashland. The middle of the city might be 6.3 miles. Didn't mean anything. You go to Natick and it's 12.2, Framingham. So the organizations of the events were in the primitive stages of compared to what there was no chip timing. The entry fees cost me $2 to run Boston. What does it cost today? $300 maybe? I don't know. I paid my $2 or whatever it was, and I was in. The charities changed everything. And by that, I mean, because it was a fundraising deal, it brought more people into the sport, and then the races started charging higher fees. And I was, let me just say it, pissed off. My sport. It changed my sport from a family group of guys that I saw every weekend, 200 to 300 runners, would cost us a quarter, 50 cents to run or nothing. So all of a sudden we're paying $3, $4, $5 to run a race. But it did create a whole marketable division, running shoes, running clothing. So there's a lot of positives that came out of it.
When you started creating races, what of that did you take? How was your approach? What were you providing to the athletes? These weren't necessarily elite. Run to a party boat, it wasn't an elite race. What was your goal for the athletes?
My goal was to put on a successful event on behalf of my company, Nike, because that was their direction. Go put on some events and expose the name. So I had Nike products to give away as awards. There was a Nike logo on the wine glass. There was Nike logo on the T-shirt. And I invited the top runners in the area to compete for free. Gary Gettleman was located in San Jose, right near where the race was. He had a running store, so it helped the Nike brand. He was a top runner. He brought his athletes over to run. So there was a lot of reasons to put on a successful, safe race.
Yeah, very cool.
We're not done with Ron Wayne. There'll be more in the next episode about his running career and his career ongoing with Mizuno and the very exciting SMARTeam initiative that he has, mentoring upcoming and already very successful young runners. I hope you enjoyed another episode. Do you have someone you'd like to hear interviewed on the podcast? You can leave a comment on the YouTube channel or on the website, running70s.com. That's running70s.com. Let me know what you think of the episodes and anyone, including yourself, you'd like to hear interviewed. I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.